Hello and welcome back. Today we have Godzilla X Kong, the new Emperor, Mothra with Gia figure from Playmates Toys Monsterverse series. This is Mothra as it appeared in the Godzilla X Kong film from last year now? Year before? I can't remember. I have a number of the figures from the Godzilla Monsterverse line, and I quite enjoy the figures. Before we get into this, I want to make it clear that these are, they're £10 toys. They are quite squarely aimed solely at children. They are not aimed at collectors in any way whatsoever. They are solely children's toys. They're meant to be played with. So as a result, they're not going to have the paint apps. They're not going to have the articulation that some might expect from a collector's point of view. The only reason I mention that is because every time I see someone talk about, let me start that again. Every time I see an adult talking about toys which are primarily aimed at children, there's always complaints against the toys, which I often end up feeling are quite unfair because they end up comparing them to collector line toys rather than toys which are meant to be thrown in a toy box at the end of the day. So that's the only reason I'm mentioning that. But otherwise, I actually really quite like this line. They're nice for sort of the £10 price point. They're nice representation of the characters from the films. They often have a reasonable amount of articulation and detailing. That's my 2 cents on the line as a whole. As for Mothra, here we have Mothra in this open style packaging. You can see that she's secured solely with a couple of cable ties, so it's limited on plastic, which I always like. Down at the bottom we get Kong and the evolved Godzilla, so it's got the pinkish spines. Down in the corner we have the name and the accessory it comes with, so it's Mothra, and it comes with a tiny little Gia figure. In the background of the packaging you can see the crystals from the Under Earth and some yellow lightning and things. It's quite nice box art throughout. On the side here we have the standard product line shot of Kong and Godzilla. On the back we have a brief bio of the film, and we also get a brief bio on Mothra herself. We get a cross sale at the bottom of other figures in the line. I think I actually have most of those figures in the line actually. Tiamat's a great figure. I have Kong. I gave it a quick paint tap and that really brought it out. Shimo, absolutely fantastic figure. But anyway, we also then get a product shot of Mothra and the Gia figure and a summary of it. It's fully articulated and posable. Right, before we open it, the product shot for Mothra is incredibly different from this. So immediately we can see this figure is just some plastic with stickers, decals on it for the moth effects, which I can understand and appreciate. It's probably very expensive to give this level of paint app and detailing and moulding and all that. However, here you can see that the wings were, I assumed that this was a prototype before they did the final copy, and you can see here that they've printed on, and that the wings were actually had molded detail as well. There's also some additional paint apps down here which we'll compare in a minute. So I understand that figure for the £10 price point that these sort of sit at would have been far too expensive and unrealistic to achieve. However, I do not like the fact that the figure here isn't a representation of what we got here. I feel that's a little misleading, but that's just me. Anyway, let's get Mothra opened up and take a look at her. I just need cutters. Here's my snippers. So we get the main cable tie here, which is around the body. Just snip that, and then there is these tiny little plastic tags, which are surprisingly durable to snip. And then Mothra just slides out of the packaging. There's nothing else there. Nothing underneath either, so it's literally just a figure in the plastic cardboard shell. It's a very, very light figure. It's small in the hands, bar the wings. So looking at the figure immediately, we get those decals, which are literally just stuck on over the solid brown plastic. They're nice enough, and as I said, I understand why we have those over actual printed molds, or it would have been far too expensive. I'm just disappointed that the product shot on the back isn't a representation of the figure in the packaging. One thing I will note about the decals is when I bought this and originally got it home, I noticed one of these decals was peeling away from the edge slightly. I pushed it back down and it seems to be stuck now. However, as a kid's toy, be mindful that the decals may not have the strongest glue and may start peeling, which if that is the case, then that's really, really disappointing, and I'd imagine a lot of children would be quite disappointed with that. Otherwise, the figure itself, there's not a lot to it overall. It's a simple brown mold. We get a little bit of paint tap around the eyes and some tiny paint taps on the legs. Otherwise, it is just the solid black mold, brown mold. There is molded details for the antennas and the head curving into the body itself. Otherwise, there's nothing else to it. The wings are fully articulated and they are on a hinge and swivel joint. So you can get a full rotation of them, and they can go up, down, back, forwards, and the same with the front wings. Other than that, it's a very simplistic figure. This hasn't been one I've been desperate to get. I thought it looked fairly simplistic, but I happened to see it on sale and felt that the collection needed a Mothra to complete it, or at least update it a little. So that's the only reason. It's a nice enough figure. If you're a fan of Mothra, I think you will like it well enough. I would imagine if a kid had it, they would, again, probably enjoy it well enough, but it's not the showstopper of Kong or Godzilla. The joints they're not, they're loose-ish, but they're not majorly loose, so they're going to sit, but it's a simple knock and they're going to fall. Posing it, I think, is going to be a little difficult. It doesn't, between the wings, itself, it's quite top and back heavy, so you can see it topples over. It's going to take some messing around to try and get it posed. That is disappointing. To get it posed, I've got to have it with the wings literally face down like that, which is disappointing, and an annoyance. Display posability on a character like this is always an odd thing for me, because on the one hand, as this is a child's toy, I'm not expecting a figure that's going to necessarily stand and display amazingly. However, equally, I do feel that the figures should be able to stand on their own. I remember as a kid having, I'll bring Sonic in as an example. You'd have them stood up, and you'd have them posed a little. Not necessarily on a shelf quality, but you do want them to be able to sort of pose on the floor while you've got the other figures running around or something. So that's frustrating. But yeah, I guess it is what it is. At the end of the day, as I said, it's not an essential figure. It's not amazing, but it's reasonable enough. Other than that, there's nothing really else to add to this figure. Oh, there's some nice moulding detail underneath as well. But yeah, other than that, there's nothing else really to add to this figure. It is what it is at the end of the day. It's nice to have a Mothra in the collection. It will go nicely on the shelf with the others, but it's nowhere near an essential purchase. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be back soon.